Hello, Namaste. Welcome to the Apes Hammer Show. This is weekly English talk show on Indigenous television and ITV Nepal. This talk show features in-person and sometimes online interviews of a guest from different walk of life. In this English talk show, we discuss on Indigenous issues affecting Indigenous communities worldwide. And we share the experiences and try to foster a connection between the communities. So today in this episode, I have a very special guest from Philippines, who is a station manager of only Indigenous-led community radio, which is based in Philippines. And we are going to talk about the role of that Indigenous community radios for the communities. And her name is Gwendolyn, and she is a station manager. Let me first welcome to the show. Welcome, Gwendolyn.
Thank you, Dev. Thank you for having me over here at Indigenous television. And yes, I'm excited. This is the first time I would be on Indigenous people's television.
Wow, thank you. and as I said in background, that you are the station manager of the Radio Sagada.
Mm-hmm.
And also, beside this radio, you are also doing a lot of activism and campaigns and so forth. I think you wear different hats. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, okay. I am Gwen. I am also an Indigenous person from the Kankanali and Bontoc tribes in northern Luzon in the Cordilleras. So, how do you say this? I actually grew up in the city, but moved back to Sagada in 2000 to help establish Raja Sagada there. So Raja Sagada has been there since 2010. We were on air 2010, and yes, until now we are on air.
So I just quickly researched in the Google that Radio Sagada is only Indigenous led radios in the Philippines, and you also have a lot of stories to tell. Actually, stories of a struggle. Could you just tell me how the Radio Sagada was born, and how the communities actually Indigenous communities actually manage that Radio Sagada?
Actually, there were two radio stations that were set up in the early 2000 for Indigenous peoples. One in the Cordillera in Sagada, and the other one was in Cagayan. But unfortunately, Cagayan did not even last 1 year. The station was burned down. The staff were all tied up inside the station and burned, maybe because of their activism. And Radyo Sagada is another station that was established also way back in 2009 and only was able to go on air in 2010. This is a community radio that's different from the community radios of government because they also have their community radios. Radio Sagada is owned by the community. We call it a general assembly, and various sectors are members there. We have the farmers, women, church people, tour guides, small business owners, and a lot. There are 13 sectors who are part of the organization that makes it a community ownership. They make the decisions in terms of what should be on air, what should not be, and different policies. So with all of this, were all written down in 2010 and submitted under the Securities and Exchange Commission in the Philippines. So we are legal. It's not it's not guerrilla radio. No, it's not. It's totally legal and controlled and owned by the community.
Indigenous community.
Indigenous community of Sagada. Even if it's a community radio and we only operate at 250 watts, our location makes it possible for us to reach other Indigenous peoples of the Kalingas, of the Abra people, Benguet people, all in the Cordillera, and other parts of Ilocano areas in Regions 2 and Regions 1. So it's huge. The reach is very huge.
So you shared the sad story of the radio, another radio, that the staff were burned down inside the inside the radio station or that house, and they couldn't operate. I think similar kind of a stories also you have it, right? The regular or often even Radio Sagada has been attacked by the government. That I read the news about that one. And could you just tell me that sort of incident, why that occurred or when that occurred, and how could you how you were able to survive in that one?
Oh, when was this? When Radyo Sagada was established, because it was really established for indigenous peoples and other marginalized peoples in our communities, that alone was enough to brand it as a, how do you say this, anti-government radio. So since then, we were always in the eyes of the military. Even the songs that we have been playing, we've been playing progressive people music and even just entertainment, and they say that it is anti-government. So I'm not sure, I think it was in 2016 when the government started this campaign. They call it the task force to end communist insurgency in the Philippines. The military made a report at the Senate, and they included Radyo Sagada as a communist front there. So there were no direct attacks. We did not have any proof that our station was the destruction in our transmitter tower and robbery inside the station were initiated by the military. We don't have any proof, but yes, those were the incidents and threats to the volunteers to tone down with their positions in terms of indigenous peoples. But Radyo Sagada has been able to survive because the community always back us up, including local government. They say that, oh, how can these people be insurgents? How can they be part of the New People's Army? We see them every day. They're there. They interview us. They air their sentiments on radio.
All right. So Radio Sagada was also born out of the indigenous people's activism, as you said.
Yes.
And you were just telling me in background about that. You are serving in the areas of Lugon, Sagada itself, which is the mountainous area in the Philippines where the indigenous peoples are concentrated more. And you were also telling me about the Benguet. I also was fortunate to visit this Benguet area actually. And I could observe myself a lot of, this gold mining was taking place in the indigenous people's land and territories. Could you tell me a little background about this, gold mining and its effect on the indigenous peoples, and then how your Radio Sagada actually is serving them and giving them a voice from, Lugon or the Benguet, that area, as you said.
Yes, thank you, Dev. How do you say? Traditionally, gold is mined by the people in the Cordilleras through a method they call small-scale mining. But they only mine what they need, and then that's what they use to exchange for things that they need. Like many centuries ago, it was used in exchange for salt. We didn't have salt in the Cordilleras, and other things from the lowlands. But when then the Spanish people came, they took over the Cordillera, and that's where they started to establish big mining corporations. The biggest was where you went in Benguet, that is the Lepanto Mining Corporation. Can you imagine more than 300 years of Spanish rule setting up the mines? And it continued. It continued until now. So big mining corporations started coming in. And they, how do you say this, they displaced the livelihoods of our people, the small-scale miners, because they took over our lands. And I was sharing with you this morning, Dev, there are 3 new mining applications that have been approved in the Cordillera alone. Yeah, there's one in Kalinga, another one in the place that you visit in Benguet, in Itogon, and another one in, how do you say this place? Abra, and it covers 4 municipalities. Yeah. So there you go. We lost our land, lost our livelihoods to large-scale mining corporations, mostly from Canada and Australia. Yeah. But the people are fighting back. They're pushing back, no? And we have been, how do you say this? We have been victorious in the past against big energy projects like these dams. And I hope we can rally our people together and push back against these big mining corporations. Also, we also need the support of our indigenous brothers and sisters in other countries to share the stories and advocate for our self-determination in the Cordillera and other parts of the Philippines.
As you said, that Radio Sagada was also born out of the indigenous people's activism, as you said. So what role do you think the radio actually play to be a voice of the voiceless, what they call is voiceless or oral communities, oral indigenous communities in Philippines?
Yeah, that's right. Radyo Sagada, there are 3 ways where we do our work in terms of amplifying and providing voices for indigenous peoples. On air, there are 2 things, our programs. So we have indigenous peoples from different parts of the Cordillera, even outside of the Cordillera in the Philippines. We have them, how do you call this, phone patch, yeah, in person so that they can share their stories. We also cover them in our news and of course in our Facebook page also. That's one way. Off air, we do a lot of work also. So we do, I think we are the only indigenous people's radio or only radio that do community work. We try to empower our people to speak up. We have the right to speech and expression. And if we do not empower our people, it would just be us talking. But we need people to share their own stories. So those are the ways that we try to provide space for indigenous peoples on Radyo Sagada, off air and on air.
That means that the indigenous communities who are in trouble, they can make a phone call to the radio stations, and the radio station can broadcast for that one. That means Radio Sagada has been like friends of the communities.
Oh yes, that is why, I think that's very crucial for our survival. If our community will not support us, it would have been shut down a long time ago. But because our community supports Radio Sagada.
That means communities are also Radio Sagada's friend and community's friend. Radio Sagada is also friend of the communities. So you are playing the double role. So could you just tell me the languages, the languages that the languages you use to produce the radio content in the Radio Sagada and its effectiveness actually. I know for sure that Radio Sagada has been producing radio programs in different languages, and in Nepal we also have community radios, but in fact majority of contents which are in other than indigenous languages, which are Nepali. I think Nepali language, national language, which is those serving to the community, but that is not that much impacting to the community. So what is your observation or your experiences? To what extent the indigenous language program content is effective to the community, reaching to the communities?
Yes. I think it's very crucial that when we do our broadcasts, the communities understand us. So we broadcast in a language that they would understand, which is basically our local language, which is Kankanae. And in the Cordillera region, there is what they call Ilocano language, which is generally understood in Luzon. So we also broadcast in Ilocano because we reach Ilocano areas there. So local language, Ilocano, and then if we have people coming in from Manila or even outside of Manila, like indigenous peoples at an international level. We also broadcast in English and Filipino, but we always make a translation in the local language. Yes, so there you go. It's really important to speak a language that people would understand.
So you translate. If you don't translate, that means there's a risk of the security.
We really need to translate because we need to provide them with the right information, and many of our listeners are haven't reached much education, so it's difficult for them to understand English. And in order for us to reach them, we have to translate in our language.
So, okay, you shared a little about the threat that the radios or journalists actually are facing in the Philippines. But from the outside, we often hear that journalists, even the government actually targets to the indigenous journalist. They're red tagged or they give a threaten. So have you ever experienced yourself personally, or the radio station as such has been red tagged? And how did you overcome on that?
Yes, as I was sharing earlier, the military, the armed forces of the Philippines made a report to the Philippine Senate that we are a communist front. Not just red tagging, just directly saying that we are a front. Sadly, some of our companions at the radio station were intimidated by this constant red tagging, but no charges were ever filed. But it's a pressure on some of our volunteers. So we also had to, how do you say this, process among ourselves collectively that we should not back off. We should be true to our mission. That's why Radio Sagada is there. Otherwise, it would be useless to have such an opportunity to have this station in the Cordillera. So that's what we do. We process and provide a collective strength so that we would persevere.
So, okay. So, congratulations that you have been able to at least sustain a radio for last 15 years now, right?
Yes.
Since you established in 2010. Could you just tell me some of the challenges that you are facing as a radio station, and how you are surviving that challenges? What are the major challenges that indigenous-led community radios actually face?
Just only one radio station, indigenous radio station, and that's Radio Sagada. That's one. I think that's the one challenge for indigenous media in the Philippines. There are very limited indigenous media in the Philippines, more so for radio and television. So we are lucky to be able to sustain Radio Sagada. Funding is one difficulty because we have to, how do you say this, be choosy about where we accept advertisements and support. Many big companies would like to advertise, even these chemical pesticides and feeds that they used in farms. They would like to have access with Radio Sagada, but we don't allow that because these are detrimental to the environment and our people, especially big mining companies and electric generation companies. So that's one. Second, nature. The Philippines is always battered by big typhoons all throughout the year, which makes it difficult. Our tower is located 2.5 hours away from the center, so we have to go up to switch it on, put it off in the evening, and it's a mountainous area. We experienced lots of landslides, trees falling on the wires and destroying the radio cables, our equipment. So those are the major things that I would say be the challenges. And of course, in terms of political strength. No? That's one challenge. We constantly have to remind ourselves why we are there, the role of media for indigenous peoples. But we're able to overcome. Now, for Radyo Sagada, without the support of a lot of people and institutions, we won't be able to survive. You know what, Dev? This year, January, our transmitter was struck by lightning. And we were off air for a long, long time. This was the longest time we were off air. And we are so happy and lucky that Cultural Survival was able to provide us the means to purchase a new transmitter and put us back on air. For 9 months, we were off air and we functioned through our Facebook page. So thank you very much. Cultural Survival has been very, very helpful in the sustainability of Radyo Sagada.
That is happy to listen that Cultural Survival also has been a part in your journey or struggles.
Oh, yes.
And you have, being a station manager for last 15 years, you also have traveled to many other, not indigenous led, I guess, but the community radios in different part of the world. And when you observe the radio stations in other part, and when you come back and you see your own radios, do you think that there are many rooms that you also can improve, or we can work together, because there are also indigenous community radios or indigenous radios in other part of the globe? And have you ever thought to build a kind of network?
Yes, thank you, Dev. I wasn't the station manager when it was established. It was actually Mary Carlin. She is the sister of John Carlin. And I've been with Radyo Sagada as a broadcaster. Only in 2022 was I asked to stay as station manager, because Mary got sick and she had to leave the station. Okay, yeah, that's right. I think it's very important for indigenous peoples to really, especially the media, indigenous media, to get together. So we're happy that connecting with Cultural Survival, connecting with Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, with World Association of Indigenous Community Radios in Asia Pacific and at international level, has helped us get in touch with our colleagues, indigenous colleagues in TV, print, and radio at a global scale. There's much that we have to learn, because, as I said, the Radyo Sagada is just, we are only few in the station, and we need to, how do you say this, upgrade our capabilities in terms as broadcasters, as journalists, even in fact as indigenous peoples and human rights advocates. So also now we have been linking, Cultural Survival again has provided opportunities also for us to be exposed, no? And to be able to provide trainings at the community level for our citizen journalists. So does AIPP and this the Indigenous Voices of Asia Network, the IVAN Network. Through these exchanges, we are learning so much. This digital challenge, Dev, is another thing that makes number 4. Yeah, it's totally something that we have to accept, but also know how to use. And yes, I hope we would have more opportunities to understand how this would be taken advantage by indigenous peoples.
That is good. We also have similar experiences in Nepal, that we also had initiated Indigenous Media Foundation back in 2011, launched first established indigenous-led radio in some different rural part, and then we also made a network of indigenous community radio network, and then launched television. It has been 10 years that even a television. But we also have similar kind of struggles and stories to tell. But I want to know your own experiences. having been practiced, what do you think how the radios or the television actually best serve to the indigenous communities? What is the major role that they can play?
Um, radio is so important because people who need to be informed, those without limited access to internet, limited access to print media, radio serves them to be informed. They get to be connected to their communities, and they get to be connected also at the national level to know things that are happening, especially when it comes to politics, which always affects them, and also at an international level. So, how does this China thing affect them? Okay, so Trump won the election. How would that affect their lives as indigenous peoples in the communities? So that's one thing. Radio really provides information so that when they make decisions, at least these decisions would be an informed decision. I think that's very important for radio to provide.
All right. So Gwen, we have reached almost at the end of the show.
Really?
So at last, I would like to request you to give maybe one-line message to the indigenous communities or the indigenous broadcasters. Just like in your radios, there are also many other colleagues who have run radio. Perhaps you have some message to tell them. Anything at last, or anything that I haven't asked you but you want to tell?
Okay, thank you so much, Dev. We indigenous peoples have so much to share to the world, especially now with the challenges also at the global scale in terms of climate change, and the threats that we experience as indigenous peoples are all the same. The threats to our land, all this land grabbing, all this mining and large-scale projects, all the same. The narratives are all the same everywhere. And I think that is something, as indigenous peoples, it is our challenge to share these stories, to call for other people to advocate and support our struggles. And that alone should be strength enough for us to persevere. I know it's so difficult to be journalists, broadcasters, but being true to ourselves as indigenous peoples is enough to give us courage to continue. And we are not alone. We can always increase in our numbers. Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Gwendolyn, for joining us on Dave's Hammer Show and also for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Dev. And yes, hopefully we can also take you over to Radyo Sagada and we do this interview also on air.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Gwendolyn, today we actually had Gwendolyn, station manager of Radio Sagada. She actually shared a lot of inspirations that how the indigenous communities in Philippines could set up a radio and could sustain for last 15 years, and how the Radio Sagada, being indigenous people's radio, only radio in Philippines, is serving to the communities. So we have reached at the end of the show. That doesn't mean that the communication has stopped, but communication will continue. If you have any queries or feedbacks relating to the programs, you can reach us at theindigenoustelevision@gmail.com. Please join us next week in the next new brand episodes with new guests. We'll discuss new topic. By then, have a nice weekend. Namaste.